The First Lady of the United States threatened to sue a journalist for $1 billion. Not a million, a billion. The threat came with a deadline. Retract your statements, apologize publicly, pay damages, or face the most expensive defamation lawsuit in American media history. What the journalist said that triggered this extraordinary response involves Jeffrey Epstein, the late financier who died in federal custody while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. And now, as millions of pages of Epstein documents flood into public view, Melania Trump is doing everything in her legal power to avoid answering questions under oath about what she knew and when she knew it. This is not a story about tabloid gossip. This is a story about power, about intimidation, and about what happens when someone with unlimited resources decides to silence the press. Michael Wolff has written 4 best-selling books about Donald Trump: Fire and Fury, Siege, Landslide, All or Nothing. He has never been sued by the Trump family for any of them. But in October 2025, the First Lady's attorney sent him a letter that changed everything. The letter demanded that Wolff immediately retract statements he had made connecting Melania Trump to Jeffrey Epstein's social circle. It demanded a public apology. It demanded monetary compensation. And it warned that failure to comply would result in legal action seeking more than $1 billion in damages. The statements in question appeared in a Daily Beast article and an accompanying podcast episode. Wolff, who had conducted extensive interviews with Epstein before his death in 2019, had suggested that Melania Trump was very involved in managing the White House response to the ongoing Epstein controversy. He had described her presence in Epstein's expansive social network during the years when she first met Donald Trump, and he had referenced claims Epstein had made to him about the circumstances of how Melania and Donald Trump first became romantically involved. Within days of the billion-dollar threat, the Daily Beast retracted the article. The publication issued an apology, stating that, upon reflection, the story did not meet their standards. Portions of the podcast episode were removed. The retraction was comprehensive and immediate. But Wolff did not comply. Instead, he did something no journalist had ever done to a sitting First Lady. He sued her first. The lawsuit, filed in New York State Supreme Court in October 2025, invoked New York's anti-SLAPP laws. SLAPP stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. These are lawsuits designed not to win on the merits, but to silence critics through the threat of ruinous legal costs. New York strengthened its anti-SLAPP protections, specifically to defend journalists and public interest advocates from exactly this kind of intimidation. Wolff's legal filing did not mince words. It accused Melania Trump and her unitary executive husband, along with their MAGA myrmidons, of making a practice of threatening costly SLAPP actions to silence speech, intimidate critics, and extract unjustified payments and North Korean-style confessions and apologies. The lawsuit seeks more than just protection from the billion-dollar threat. It seeks the right to depose Melania Trump under oath. It seeks the right to question Donald Trump under oath. And it seeks subpoena power to compel testimony from anyone in the Trump orbit who might have knowledge of the family's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Wolff stated his intentions directly in a video posted to social media when he filed the suit. To be perfectly honest, I would like nothing better than to get Donald Trump and Melania Trump under oath in front of a court reporter and actually find out all of the details of their relationship with Epstein. The response from the White House has been aggressive. Communications Director Stephen Chung has repeatedly called Wolff a lying sack of expletive and a proven fraud. The president himself, speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One just this week, accused Wolff of conspiring with Epstein to do harm to me politically. Trump suggested he might sue Wolff as well, marking the 3rd or 4th time the Trump family has threatened legal action against the journalist. But the lawsuit has proceeded, and Melania Trump's legal team has responded with a series of increasingly desperate maneuvers designed to prevent the case from ever reaching the discovery phase, where depositions would occur. The first maneuver involved service of process. Wolff's attorneys attempted to serve the lawsuit on the First Lady. They tried her lawyer in Florida. The lawyer refused to accept service. They tried Trump Tower in New York, where Melania has maintained an apartment for years and where, according to Wolff's team, she spends most of her time when not at the White House. The building's front desk concierge confirmed she lives there, but refused to accept service. Papers were eventually handed to a doorman, which the First Lady's attorneys now claim does not constitute proper service because Trump Tower is not Mrs. Trump's residence. The argument creates a paradox. Melania Trump cannot be served because she cannot be approached due to Secret Service protection. Her lawyer will not accept service on her behalf. Her residence, where she actually lives, is claimed not to be her residence for purposes of service. The result is that the First Lady of the United States has effectively made herself untouchable by the civil court system. Wolff's attorneys asked the New York court to acknowledge their service attempts and deem the First Lady properly served. Before the court could rule, Melania Trump's lawyers filed to remove the case to federal court, automatically staying any state court decisions. The move to federal court carried additional advantages. It could allow the case to be transferred to the Southern District of Florida, a venue that has historically been more favorable to the Trump family. And then came the most significant escalation. Melania Trump hired DLA Piper, the third largest law firm in the world. Her new lead attorney is Josh Halpern, a partner who previously clerked for Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. The message was unmistakable. The First Lady was not simply defending herself. She was deploying overwhelming legal firepower to bury the case in procedural complexity. Wolff interpreted the move as a sign of genuine concern. "This is what Trump always does," he said on his podcast. Hires some new firm, asks questions later. The fact that they have brought in one of the largest law firms in the world suggests that they are worried. The stakes of this case extend far beyond the personal conflict between a journalist and the First Lady. At the center of everything is the question of what the Trumps knew about Jeffrey Epstein and when they knew it. The documented history of the Trump-Epstein relationship spans more than 2 decades. Photographs from the 1990s and early 2000s show Donald Trump, Melania, Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell socializing together at Mar-a-Lago and in New York. Flight logs indicate Trump traveled on Epstein's private plane at least 8 times. Trump himself acknowledged in a 2002 interview that he had known Epstein for 15 years and described him as a terrific guy who enjoyed women on the younger side. The friendship reportedly ended sometime in the early 2000s. Trump has claimed he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago, though accounts of why vary. Some reports suggest a business dispute over a real estate deal. Others point to concerns about Epstein's behavior with female staff. But the question that has haunted the Trump presidency since the release of the first Epstein documents is whether Trump knew more about Epstein's activities than he has acknowledged. And now, newly released emails are raising that question with renewed intensity. In a 2011 email to Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein wrote about Trump. "I want you to realize that that dog that has not barked is Trump. A victim spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned." In a 2019 email to Michael Wolff, Epstein wrote even more explicitly. "Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member, ever. Of course he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop." These emails, released by the House Oversight Committee, do not prove that Trump committed any crime. But they raise questions that Trump has refused to answer, and they explain why the administration has fought so aggressively to control the release of Epstein documents, despite Trump's campaign promise to make them fully public. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, which Trump signed in November 2025, required the Justice Department to release all Epstein-related documents within 30 days. The deadline passed. The full release did not happen. Instead, documents have trickled out in batches, heavily redacted, often without context or organization. Just this week, the Justice Department released what it claims is the final major tranche, more than 3 million pages, more than 2,000 videos, more than 180,000 images. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche insisted the release fulfilled the legal requirement and denied that any client list of men who abused women was being withheld. But critics are not satisfied. Democratic Representative Julie Johnson of Texas called the release a cover-up. "The more Donald Trump tries to cover up the Epstein files, the more we uncover," said Ranking Member Robert Garcia of the House Oversight Committee. The files released this week include email exchanges between Epstein and billionaires Elon Musk and Bill Gates. They include texts between Epstein and former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who messaged Epstein just weeks before his arrest. Now you can understand why Trump wakes up in the middle of the night sweating when he hears "you and I are friends," Epstein wrote to Bannon in June 2019. Bannon replied with a single word: dangerous. The files include evidence that Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick arranged to visit Epstein's private island in 2012. They include a spreadsheet of complaints made to the FBI about Trump and Epstein, though the FBI notes that many of the complaints were unverified. And running through all of it is the thread that connects back to Melania Trump and the lawsuit she is now fighting with every resource at her disposal. Wolff has spent years interviewing Epstein. He has hours of recorded conversations. He was working on an Epstein biography when the financier died. And he claims to have information about the early relationship between Donald and Melania Trump that came directly from Epstein himself. The First Lady's position is that these claims are false, defamatory, and designed solely to generate attention and money. Her spokesperson has called Wolff's lawsuit the desperate action of someone seeking undeserved attention through unlawful conduct. But if the claims are false, the discovery process offers an opportunity to disprove them. Depositions under oath, document requests, subpoenas for records and witnesses. If Melania Trump has nothing to hide, the lawsuit presents an opportunity for vindication. Instead, the First Lady's legal strategy has focused entirely on preventing that process from ever occurring. Challenging service, moving to federal court, seeking dismissal on procedural grounds, hiring an army of lawyers to generate delay. Wolff has raised more than $800,000 through a GoFundMe campaign to fund his legal battle. The First Lady's lawyers have pointed to this fundraising as evidence that the lawsuit is not serious, merely a publicity stunt. But Wolff argues the fundraising proves the opposite. It demonstrates that ordinary Americans believe this case matters enough to contribute their own money to see it through. The irony of the situation is difficult to miss. Donald Trump built his political brand in part on promises of transparency. Release the Epstein files, expose the powerful people hiding the truth, drain the swamp. And now his wife is engaged in an aggressive legal campaign to prevent a journalist from asking questions about the very scandal Trump promised to expose. This is what it looks like when power is used to silence inquiry. $1 billion threat. A retraction forced from a major publication. A lawsuit met with procedural obstruction. A journalist branded a liar by the White House communications director. And a First Lady who refuses to answer questions under oath about what she knew regarding a convicted sex trafficker who socialized at her husband's club. The case continues to wind through the courts. Wolff has vowed to keep pursuing it. Melania Trump has vowed to fight it at every step, and the documents keep coming, drip by drip, revealing more about the world Jeffrey Epstein inhabited and the powerful people who moved through it. This week, Trump's own Justice Department released files showing Epstein's extensive communications with the president's inner circle. Next week, more files will follow. And somewhere in the legal system, a lawsuit sits waiting that could compel the First Lady of the United States to answer questions she has spent millions of dollars trying to avoid. The pattern of legal intimidation extends beyond Wolff. The Trump family has developed a systematic approach to managing unfavorable coverage. Threaten billion-dollar lawsuits, force retractions through the sheer cost of defense, brand critics as liars and frauds. The strategy has worked before. The Daily Mail paid Melania Trump $2.7 million in 2017 to settle a defamation lawsuit. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff, a former advisor who wrote a tell-all book about her friendship with the First Lady, was sued by the Justice Department during Trump's first term over alleged breaches of her non-disclosure agreement. That suit was dropped after Biden took office. But Wolff represents a different kind of opponent. He has the resources and the legal framework to fight back. New York's anti-SLAPP statute provides protection specifically for speech on matters of public concern. And it is difficult to argue that questions about a president and First Lady's relationship with a convicted sex trafficker do not constitute matters of public concern. The questions Wolff wants to ask are straightforward. When did Melania first meet Jeffrey Epstein? How many times did she socialize with him? Was she aware of his reputation? What conversations did she have with her husband about Epstein after his initial conviction in Florida in 2008? What role has she played in the White House's handling of Epstein-related document releases? These are questions the First Lady has never answered publicly, and based on her legal strategy, she has no intention of ever answering them. The movie Melania premiered this week at the Kennedy Center. Directed by Brett Ratner, who himself faces allegations of sexual misconduct, the documentary presents the First Lady's carefully curated version of her life story. It is a portrait of elegance and restraint, of immigrant success and maternal devotion. What it does not include is any mention of Jeffrey Epstein, any reference to the lawsuit pending against her, or any acknowledgement of the questions that continue to swirl around her early years in New York and the circles she moved through before becoming Mrs. Donald Trump. The timing of the premiere, in the same week that millions of new Epstein documents became public, captured something essential about this moment. On one hand, a polished narrative designed to shape public perception. On the other, a flood of raw documents that tell a messier story about money, power, and the connections that bound America's elite to a man who trafficked underage girls. Trump himself addressed the Epstein controversy while flying to Florida this week. What this whole thing is with Epstein is a way of trying to deflect from the tremendous success that the Republican Party has, he said. He dismissed renewed interest in the documents as a witch hunt and insisted the files exonerate him rather than implicate him. But the documents continue to raise questions. Why did Epstein text Steve Bannon about Trump sweating at night over their friendship? Why did prosecutors document multiple tips alleging Trump traveled on Epstein's plane far more times than previously reported? Why did Epstein allegedly tell Wolff that Trump knew about the girls? The official answer from the White House is that all of these claims are lies, that Epstein was a manipulative fabulist who made things up to protect himself, and that no credible evidence connects Trump to any wrongdoing. That may well be true, but refusing to answer questions under oath is not the behavior of people with nothing to hide. The Wolff lawsuit offers a mechanism for getting answers. Discovery would compel the production of documents. Depositions would require testimony under penalty of perjury. If the Trump version of events is accurate, the legal process would vindicate them. Instead, the legal process is being fought at every turn. Service is being evaded, jurisdiction is being challenged, motions to dismiss are being filed. And the First Lady has surrounded herself with enough lawyers to ensure that procedural battles alone could consume years. Wolff has said he would consider settling the case, but only under extraordinary conditions. If they were to enter into covenants never again to sue any media organisation for libel, he speculated on his podcast. Would I accept that? Possibly, but it would have to be something as definitive as that. The likelihood of such a settlement is essentially zero. The Trump approach to media relations has always been combative. Lawsuits are tools of leverage, weapons to be deployed against critics regardless of their merit. The billion-dollar threat to Wolff was never about winning in court. It was about making him stop. It did not work. And now, the First Lady faces a lawsuit she cannot easily dismiss, filed by a journalist who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain from pursuing the case to its conclusion. The billion-dollar threat was meant to end the story. Instead, it became the story. And that story is just beginning.